This is Duke University.
So in the second part of our seminar, we're going to push a little bit deeper on the business side and the calculations that a real estate, commercial real estate decision would actually entail. Pat is going to lead us through thinking about some general questions about this, show you what the conversation looks like when you try to convince a customer from Ingersoll Rand's perspective for why they should do a retrofit or adopt some energy efficiency. We wanted to include this kind of mock conversation so that you can actually see, in theory, the energy efficiency case always looks good because of the numbers you put on paper, and you assume that anyone's going to recognize it and want to do it, but there are these obstacles in organizations and in individuals that can make that conversation hard. So we want you to actually see what a conversation looks like. So Pat will kind of set things up, show you what a conversation looks like, and then we're going to put the pressure back on you. We're going to have roughly half of you in the role of having to convince a customer about some energy efficiency adoptions, and half of you on the side of a commercial real estate entity making the decision about do you want to actually make that adoption. Okay, so we're going to put you in both sides, have you guys brainstorm what you would be arguing if you're on the side selling it, what you'd be thinking about if you're on the side considering it, and kind of get you set up that way to have a deeper understanding of the basic set of questions. So Pat's going to kick things off. He decided to weave his biography into his slides, so he'll do a little more background on his experience as a train and at Ingersoll Rand. And I'll turn things over to you, Pat. Let me get your slides popped up here.
Thank you, Rick. I've been in this industry for about 25 years now. I made a decision in my, well, I'm not going to tell you how old I was because that'll tell you how old I am now, right? That I wanted to do something more with my life than if I was going to spend 50, 60 hours a week working, doing something to earn a paycheck, that I wanted to do something more than just earn that paycheck. And many of you have made that same kind of decision in the careers you have chosen here, so I applaud you for that. But I made the decision I wanted to get into energy conservation. I had been selling in industrial equipment for a while, a couple of years, and thought that I really wanted to do something a little different. So I went out and found an opportunity with a company that was selling controls into buildings to reduce energy. And here was the proposition I was given. All you need to do is go to the customers, to go to your prospects, tell them that we'll come in and we'll evaluate their buildings. We'll tell them how much energy we can save for them by putting in our controls and doing some upgrade work. We'll finance it for them, and then we'll guarantee that the savings will pay for that financing. That's a no-brainer, right? Oh, this is going to be easy. I'm going to be able to cut back to 30 hours a week, and we'll be able to do all kinds of great things. Didn't work that way. It was amazing how difficult it was to get through that discussion and convince customers that this was a real deal and something they need to be evaluating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what's been happening in the last 25 or so years in the energy business. I think both Brian and Rick did a nice job of setting up the opportunity that we have in existing buildings. And that's going to be my focus. There's a huge base of existing buildings here in the United States, and even though we've been doing a lot of energy work over the past 25 or 30 years, the opportunity still is amazing, still very, very large. So we'll go through a little bit here. What I'm going to talk about very quickly, I've got to do a little IR commercial, I promise it'll be fast. Then I'm going to talk about what's happened over the last 25 years. Where has there been success in doing energy efficiency in existing buildings? And my comments are going to be focused here in the United States. I've got a very short time frame here. What's happening around the world, it's very different for different regions of the world, so I want to stay focused on what we're doing here because I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from that. Then we're going to go from where we've been successful and talk a little bit about the commercial market. What are some of the challenges that they've seen and why have we not been as successful there? And then we're going to set up this, we're going to do a little role play. Sue and I will do a role play to kind of set up, here's a conversation that you might see or hear or participate in if you're going to be part of a commercial real estate venture. Maybe you're an owner, maybe you're a property manager, and you're a company that's coming in and trying to do some energy efficient work in their buildings. How's that conversation start? And that will set up the case study then that you're going to take and do some break-offs and come up with some ideas on why you would or wouldn't do this kind of a project, okay? So very quickly, Ingersoll Rand. You can see we're a very large company, $14 billion. We are a true global organization. If you've golfed, I guarantee you've ridden some of our carts. We have the club car golf carts. Going across the bottom there, if you know somebody that does work with tools, I guarantee you they know about Ingersoll Rand compressors and the tools that we have there. Schlage locks. Anybody seen a Schlage lock on a door? Probably have them, in this building right here. We are number one in virtually every one of our brand names here. Hussman, if you've ever gone to a grocery store and purchased some meat at the deli, you probably were leaning on a Hussman case that kept the food cold. Thermo King got the meat there from the packing plant in a way that kept it safe and healthy for you to eat. And then Trane, which is the group I work for, you can't stop a Trane, right? Everybody knows about Trane HVAC. Well, I work in the group that actually does energy conservation work. We do have a mission to be the world leader when it comes to things like creating sustainable, safe, comfortable environments. That is our internal mission. Okay? We do that through some of these different ways. Quality and comfort of air in the buildings through what Trane provides. Transporting and protecting foods. I talked quickly about that. Our security, both in homes and commercial or institutional type buildings. Increasing industrial productivity and reducing energy use across all of these. Ingersoll Rand will be a very good organization for you to evaluate as you look for career potential. We have a lot of opportunity in the sustainable area. Okay, so what's been happening in the energy retrofit business over the past 25, 30 years? This graph you see over on the right here was done by the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and it looked at what we call the ESCO space. ESCO is the energy service companies. These are companies that for the last 25 or 30 years have been focused on doing large, significant energy reducing projects within existing buildings. So they go in to evaluate how energy is being used and how can we make that building more efficient. And funding has obviously been a very key part of that. 80% of the work that's been done has been done in the public sector, in institutionals. Brian referred to MUSH before, municipal, university, schools, and healthcare. There's 58%, and then federal 22%. So that's the institutional market. You can see very little has been done in the commercial segment. What has been the driver for what's been happening there? Well, first of all, it's deferred maintenance. If you talk to a college facility director, VP of facilities, and ask them what his number one problem is, it's going to be deferred maintenance. I don't have enough money to keep the equipment that I have up to date, maintained, working properly. And you know what? When it's not maintained and working properly, it uses more energy. Lack of tax revenue. Go to a K through 12 school district. They are always battling to try to get more funds to continue to operate or build new buildings. It's always a challenge. Well, based on those two, there was some legislation that started getting passed back in the 80s that would allow these institutional facilities, institutional organizations to borrow money, first of all, to do these kind of upgrades, to not have it count towards their debt, so that they could still go out and do additional bonding if they needed to build new buildings, right? And then also controlled how they could spend that on energy-related type of projects. So back in the 80s, it was 10 years that they could actually go out and borrow the money for, have it paid for out of savings. Then it went up to 15 years. Some states it's even 20 years now. So that legislation allowed schools, didn't require them, but allowed schools, colleges, and state and local governments to do this kind of work and to finance it, not carry that debt from year to year. So a whole new industry was developed out of that legislation. There's also been some executive orders and other legislation that has continued to drive the requirement of, for example, LEED certified type of buildings in the public sector. They accept a much longer payback than the private sector. They don't have stockholders to worry about, right? They're not worried about bringing value to the stockholders. They have to just worry about having buildings that they can educate kids in, they can conduct state business in. So it's a longer pay period. As long as it paid for itself and didn't have a negative impact on their operating budget, that's a great thing for them. And then finally, the availability of financing. There were some things that were some questions around financing. We could spend 2 hours talking about that. In fact, I have somebody full-time on my team that does nothing but look at financing for our projects, trying to figure out new ways of going after it. And there's things that pop up every day, and we have to evaluate how can we best leverage that to help our customers. But when you have a government entity that's backed by the full faith of that government, institutions or banks are more likely to loan money in that scenario because they're really not putting a lien on a building per se, it's on the faith and good credit of that organization. So that's what drove it. So why hasn't it happened in the private sector? I'm going to talk about two areas here. One's the industrial, the other's commercial. And there's some similarities there, but there are also some differences. First of all, in the industrial, it is obviously limited capital budgets. Every industrial company, every private sector company is going to go out and get operating capital every year. Out of that operating capital, they've got to do things like take care of inventory, take care of buying the loan that they need, the money they need between when they buy material and when they can actually bill their customers. Investments, research and development, as well as new facilities and upgrades. They can only borrow so much, and when they do that, there typically are going to be loan covenants in place that prevent them from doing getting additional loans. So they have a very limited resource there. They have to make decisions on where they're going to invest that. And in the back of their mind as they're making these investment decisions is they have to bring value to their stockholders. They have to make sure that they do the right things to improve their bottom line so that they can continue to operate. Okay? So that goes through a few of those things there. Energy projects tended to have a much lower priority. Rick talked about that earlier. If I can develop a new product that's going to take my company to the next level or reduce costs by lowering some energy, normally I'm going to go after that new product because that's going to grow my top line, that's going to get me out there into the commercial space better, it's going to ensure the longevity of my organization, so that's where my money's going to go. Safety, especially in the 90s, became a very large issue, and rightfully so. We have an obligation to protect the employees, and a very high cost when employees get injured on the job. So safety became a very high priority. So you got new products, research and development, you've got safety they've got to invest in. Energy still was way low, okay? And then of course the high investment hurdle rate, 18 months was not uncommon. If you were going to talk to a CFO of an industrial facility, 18 months or we're not going to talk because I've got a slew of stuff I cannot fund that are going to give me an 18 to 20 month payback. So if you're not in that range, don't even bother coming back. Sometimes up to 3 years if you impacted other areas, okay? And then the decision process. You've got the folks in the plant, you got engineering, you got maintenance that are dealing with the facilities that have the operating budgets. They don't control capital budgets. Then you got the finance part in the plant, you've got the plant manager that are worried about how do we continue things like making sure safety continues to increase, that we improve the productivity of our plants so that we can get more cost effective out there. And then you got capital decisions being made somewhere where home office is and disconnected from sometimes what's actually going on. So it became a very difficult situation, at least from a customer or a company trying to go out and institute energy conservation projects. That's a difficult sale. Commercial office space, a lot of the same kind of things. You have different responsibilities typically for your operating costs and your capital expense. The owner is the one who's going to control capital, and then you have a property manager who looks at those operating costs. The other ones have to pay the maintenance and the energy bill and those kind of things. Now they will obviously make recommendations to the owner about where they should spend their capital. They know the building best, but ultimately that decision is made by the owners. A lot of facilities are owned by multiple owners or by institutions, right? It's investments. How do you get to the people making those decisions and make sure that they're making the right kind of decision? One of the key areas, though, are these net leases. This was addressed before. If I'm a tenant, I get billed for my energy use based on a square foot basis. That was pretty common. So it didn't matter if I left my lights on or off because it was just a percentage of the cost of the whole energy bill for the building. So if the owner is going to invest money to reduce energy use in that building and make it more efficient, they don't see that. That goes back to the tenant. So their rationale and their return on their money is not there if they invest in energy savings. However, their short-term ownership and profit on flipping buildings, I need to preserve my capital as much as I can and my ability to borrow money so I can buy the next building and sell this building. That's where a lot of the money was made in that marketplace. So not a lot of incentives. And, we can go through some other things here. I want to get through this fast, though. So it just, there's a lot of initiative or inertia against doing these kind of things in the private sector. So those companies that were in the energy conservation business We focused on the short putt. We went where we could get the best return on our time in dollars, and that was in the institutional space. Okay, so that's just kind of a history of what's happened, but there are some things changing. That's a good thing, obviously. It's becoming the right thing to do now to look at energy. It is no longer just an investment decision. It's now a PR decision. It is now consumers are making decisions based on whether you are a sustainable company or not, whether products are sustainable, or whether you are doing things in the proper way. So, you know, we call it the triple bottom line. You still have that economic return you have to have, but there's also a social and an environmental piece now that companies are looking at the top level. Investors, our stockholders, are asking for these kind of things now too. So there is a shift that's happening. Continued rise of cost of energy. That is becoming a significant part of the cost of developing products, right? And in the past, they would not actually monitor what was going on product by product. You took your energy bill, you just evenly distributed it across all your products. Now they want to get more information, they want to start making investment decisions based on energy use by product. And so that there's more interest now. If I can reduce my energy cost in this particular product, I can reduce my overall cost, I can reflect that being more competitive out in the marketplace. The fourth item there, I actually was surprised to hear this. I was talking with our leader of our industrial marketplace, Fort Train, and he had said several times recently that the conversation about making existing facilities here more cost effective rather than moving to be more cost effective is becoming more of a decision that organizations are making. That's good news on a number of fronts. Nobody likes to move, obviously, but if we can keep plants here by making them more efficient and helping them be more competitive, that's obviously a great thing. Incentives were talked about, that's key. Tax incentives, incentives to do the right thing, to help lower that payback and put it in the same area of some of their other investments. There's some changes going on right now in the commercial office space too, in the leasing arrangements. So for example, sometimes capital costs now are written into the lease. We will charge you for capital costs if we can show you that it's going to reduce your operating expense. So there will be a transition there so that if we do make the building more efficient, you're going to help us pay for it because you're going to be the benefactor of that. So as we reduce it, we're going to pass on some of those capital costs. Okay. The model that a lot of commercial office space owners now are looking at is changing. Everybody knows about property values going down in recent times, right, over the last couple of years. I mean, in the real estate, commercial real estate market, it's been dramatic. And they no longer can just flip buildings. Financing is hard to get. So they're now looking at how do we make profit within the building structure without turning the building. So now that means that operating costs become more important to the owner, and that's why a lot of these changes are happening. And of course, there's high vacancy rates. Now, some of these things I'm going to get into right here are some of the challenges that are still remaining. The high vacancy rates and capital budgets being very restricted right now due to that is still making that a serious challenge to do some of these kind of projects. Financing is almost unavailable in this space. It is really tough to get financing for anything. What are they going to put a lien on a piece of property that they've already over-financed? The value of it's less than what they financed it for. And that's certainly in tax. Yes?
I would think if property owners are underwater on their investments, they'd be less likely to want to invest in these new energy efficient projects.
Absolutely, because they don't have the capital. You're
But
exactly
also
right.
because if the mortgage on the property is worth more than the value than it's worth, there's no equity. Why would they put more money into it?
In theory, you are correct. But if I'm in a situation where I am upside down and instead of flipping the building, I now have to make a profit on the operation of the building. If I can figure out a way out of my profits to start lowering my operating costs, that's going to add to my profitability. And like they talked about earlier, if I can start showing a profitable building, that's going to increase the value of that building. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, and again, this is not black and white. You'll talk to one organization, they're going to take a look at it one direction, and another company's going to look at it completely different. It is not a black and white scenario out there, especially in this marketplace we're in right now. It is a challenge. I happened to get an opportunity to speak at the Building Owners and Operating Management's International Organization's annual conference, I think probably 80% of the educational sessions had something to do with energy conservation, with sustainability. It's the big topic. But outside the rooms, if you were talking to people about what they were doing, there still wasn't a whole lot of momentum going on because they don't have the money yet to do it. If you think about when you lose tenants, you now have to pay the energy for that space, and you can't just shut it off. Lights are off, but you still have to heat and cool it, or else you're going to have problems with that building. So their operating costs are going up, energy costs are going up, so they're in a real tight squeeze right now. But we continue to try to figure out with our customers, how do we do this? How do we help you become more efficient? It is becoming more critical. So, you know, in this slide, the top things are things that are momentum moving towards being energy conservation, or towards energy conservation. The bottom ones are some of those things that just restating some stuff that's been in place for a while and still has not changed. And so that's the reality of what we're dealing with out there right now. Any other questions about what I've talked about here?
This might be getting a little ahead of what you're going to speak about in a few minutes, but from sort of a process perspective, if I'm a plant manager at, you know, a multi-million-dollar dairy plant, for example, and I sort of have an energy audit completed and I've identified savings opportunities, I know the paybacks, at what point would an organization like Ingersoll Rand or a competitor try to involve themselves in the process? I only ask that because I was at a company this summer and had an audit in front of me with identified savings and sort of no next steps. And that was almost the piece of information that was missing for the decision makers at the plant.
And that's been going on since I've been in this business. I remember walking into superintendent's offices and seeing 4 or 5 energy audits up on there. They hadn't done anything. Right. You are addressing a slide I took out of here actually because I'm trying to narrow down what I was talking about. We prefer to get engaged very early on and actually do that audit, so that as part of the audit, it's going to be what are the next steps to get done. Okay. But at the point that there is an audit, we can also come in and work with them to figure out which one of those are really, you know, we can help them implement. But you brought up a good point. This is especially true in the industrial space. They try to do a lot of these things themselves. You know, a manufacturing facility is full of engineers. This is engineering work. But guess what? They got full-time jobs. They're working on process. They're working on improving efficiencies and effectiveness. They're trying to solve the quality issue that's out there. What happens is this stuff gets put to the back burner if it's left in-house. So that's where, you know, we hope to bring some value to the table to those customers.
Do you find kind of the opposite problem in the commercial real estate business, where you've got a lot of people that have great knowledge of real estate markets but don't really have a clue how a building operates and how you communicate with them?
You know, that's a good question. Your better property management firms, they get the operating the building piece. They will have on-site staff, and they tend to have a fairly high level staff that's there. And they'll usually have somebody that's involved from an engineering perspective over multiple buildings to make sure that the changes they're making, that they're priced right, they're cost effective, they're doing the right thing, and that if they're putting, you know, certain strategies in place, it's not going to have negative effects. You know, you talk about the black and whiteness. Everything you can do to save energy is not the right thing to do for a building. When I first started in this industry, the big thing was demand scheduling. You turn things on and off all day long. Guess what? You turn a motor on and off, on and off, on and off, it fails. Do that with a chiller, you now have a $500,000 problem you just created. So there is a lot of science and engineering behind what you do here. Other questions? Okay, let's move on then. We're going to do something a little corny here, but we're going to do a role play. Okay, Sue's going to help me here. She is going to be a property manager, so she runs a commercial office building. I'm going to represent a salesperson from Ingersoll Rand, and we've agreed based on a request that the PLL company has given to our organization to come in and do an audit, a preliminary audit of their facility. And just so you know, that the process, getting back to, you know, how we do this process, rather than us coming in and doing a very detailed energy audit, we can waste a lot of time and money doing that. So what we do is a very preliminary look at the utility bills, look at what's going on in the facility, and come back and have a conversation about the things that we think we can do, what kind of ballpark price, what kind of ballpark savings. Now, how are you going to fund this? who's gonna make the decisions so that we don't waste their time and waste our time, so that we're efficient with what we do. So this is kind of the first, that meeting after going through and walking the buildings and coming up with some ideas. Then what's gonna happen after this is you're gonna have responsibility. We're gonna split you up into groups, and you're gonna, half of you are gonna be the customer, half of you are gonna be the Ingersoll Rand group, and you're going to have some questions that are going to be on a handout that you have to work through as a group so that you can take a look at what is the scenario, where could you invest your money, what would be the best way to do it, or how can you best position an opportunity like this for the customer so that they will make that step. That make sense? Okay. See if we can get this done. How much time we have here?
I don't know, 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll do it quick. Hi, Sue.
Hey, Pat, nice to see you.
Good to see you again. Thank you for your time today.
Have a seat.
By
So
the
what
way,
you got for me?
We're gonna go buy a lot of stuff we normally do in this situation.
Family and friends and all that, yeah.
Well, so I wanted to come back and have a quick conversation with you today regarding the results of our analysis of your facility, and then talk about some of the next steps that we would take if you decide this would be a project you want to implement. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Makes great sense.
Okay, great.
Looking forward to it.
Good. Well, as you can see from the report that we've given you there are a number of things that we can do within your facility to reduce your energy use, from lighting and some controls and upgrading some of the HVAC equipment that you have that uses quite a bit of your electricity. And what we're looking at is a cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 to $800,000. But the good news is that we can save you probably $200,000 to $250,000 a year in energy and operational costs. So we're talking 4 or 5 year payback is pretty attainable here. And I think based on some of the conversations we've had with your facility staff might help you some of your problems that you're having with your HVAC systems failing and not providing the right environment for your tenants here.
Okay.
So how does that strike you?
Well, that $750,000 is pretty high. And, we don't have a lot of capital. We've got things competing for that money. Of course, we need to resurface our parking lot. We've got some roof repair that's going on. We've got some other equipment that's failed that we've got to upgrade our lobby. That money, do I spend it with you, or do I spend it in the other things that really can't go away?
Well, tell me, how would you make a decision like that?
Well, our decisions that we do a prioritization based on the return on investment. So we need a really good ROI, and how does yours compare against these other things that we have? What makes me think that, that is gonna work rather than just put my money in the bank? Of course, it's the interest rate these days, but.
We got that beat, that's no problem.
But it's based on the ROI, and,
Okay.
I'm not sure you're quite there yet, Pat.
Okay. Well, when we compare ourselves, I guess you mentioned a roof, you mentioned the lobby. Tell me a little bit about the lobby.
Well, we've got some pretty high-end tenants here, very high professional, and it needs to look good. Our lobby's looking a little shabby, to maintain our occupancy rate. In fact, to be honest, we're down at 82% occupancy right now. We really can't afford to lose these guys who are threatening to go because they're bringing customers and clients in, and it just doesn't, reflect what they're looking for.
Okay. So your concern there, or the return for the lobby expenditure would be to upgrade that, would be to keep your tenants, and that's how you calculate that return? Okay, I see. And then the roof?
Well, needs to be repaired. Can't have leaks, because what other problems does that cause, right?
Yep.
So again, these are things that we absolutely have to do. We might be able to throw some tar paper up there rather than replacing the roof, to save some money, but we have to spend some money on the roof.
Okay, understandable. Well, one of the things that I have not mentioned yet in there is that we do have, there's potential for some tax incentives. And of course, I'd have to have a conversation with the owner to understand a little bit better about their situation, and probably with their tax consultant to find out if that would really apply to them or not. But that could lower that return,
Okay.
or increase the return, I should say, lower the payback period.
Okay.
Okay. And additionally, I think that some of the things that we are talking about doing will also have a positive impact on your tenant's experience here and help you with that retention. In fact, I didn't bring the information with me. It's something we can maybe talk about when we meet with the owner. There's some good data out there right now that is showing that more efficient buildings have higher occupancy rates and maybe even can increase rent rates.
I give you that one. We've been hearing a few of our tenants are going across the street to the new building that is being advertised as a sustainable facility. And you got, we might need that advantage as well.
Okay, great. Well, as far as the next step then, how would you feel about you and I meeting with your owner so that we can go through some of these things? I can present the project a little bit more in depth in terms from a financial perspective, and we can see how it stacks up against your other capital investments.
That'd be good, but you're really gonna have to come back with a little more compelling plan. You know, the ROI you're giving me and the cost with my payback plan is just, it's gonna be a really tough sell to the owners.
Okay. I will take that challenge and we'll do that.
All right.
Great.
Great,
Sue, thank you
you.
for your time. All right. All right, yeah, she is. Well, we worked that, that's good. But believe me, she's not as tough as most customers, so. All right, do we have the handouts? Okay. To be clear now, we've got two different pages here, right? The one with the graphs on the back are for the IR energy group, okay? The one without it is going to be the customer. I would encourage you to read through this as individuals and then start doing some brainstorming. And just to be real clear about this, for the owners, first thing I want you to do is to talk about, brainstorm reasons you would not do the energy project. Based on the information that's in here and what you heard us talk about, why would you not do the project? Now that's going to be difficult for a lot of you. I know you come here with a mindset, you want to promote energy efficiency. Put yourself in the shoes of the building owner, okay? Why would you not do that investment? Then switch your hat and say, okay, why would we? And ferret that out. Pick somebody then to present your concept back to the team, okay, what those ideas were. Then for those that are the Ingersoll Rand energy folks, your first step is going to be to brainstorm the objections that the customer is going to have to the project. Why would they not do it? What are the other reasons that where they would spend their money? What are some of the challenges that they might be facing in implementing this kind of a project? Okay. Then transition over what value is this going to bring to the building, to the owner, to the property manager. Don't forget the property manager is an important person in this whole scenario. If we can lower their operating costs and make their job easier, then they can feel they can do a better job for their customer, which is the building owner, and maintain that customer, okay? That if you have time, develop a value prop. What would you lead with going back to the building owner then, to Sue's point about trying to come back with a better proposition, a better value for them? Put something together as to what you would lead with to have that conversation, and then again, select a spokesperson to present that, okay? Rick, how many groups are we breaking up to?
So we have 5 groups.
Okay.
2 are on Pat's side of things, representing selling the opportunity. That's groups 1 and 2. 3, 4, and 5 are on the Sue side of things, deciding whether you want to actually go ahead with it. And so, in the spirit of taking advantage of this great mix of people, I didn't want people to just grab someone from the same year and same school as them. And I have now randomly distributed these 5 different groups. So I'm just going to have you raise your hand real quick, and then you'll find each other to do your breakout together, okay? So if you have a number 1 written in the top right-hand corner, raise your hand. Okay, I didn't shuffle it so well, but that's good. How about a 2? Okay, at least I'm mixing there. Okay, 3. Okay, you guys are finding each other. 4. Okay, you guys are finding each other. And 5. I shuffled fast and not well. They fired me in Vegas, by the way.
I was going to say, don't play cards with this guy.
Yeah, from the bottom of the deck, too. Okay, we have Lehman available to us as well, so if you want to kind of grab a little bit more space, a couple teams can go over there. There's even some team rooms reserved, but they're on the smaller side. But if you walk down this hallway and go to the first sets of rooms on the right, you can find a team room. So how long shall we give them?
You're a good straight man. 20 minutes for your discussion. Okay, so you got to hustle, get right to it. Don't talk about what you're doing on Friday. Get right into that discussion, then come back and you got 5 minutes to present each. Okay? Any questions? Go do it.
We've got markers and pads here for you to come back with something written.
Okay, here's the game plan here. We're going to start off by having the 3 customer groups come up and talk about, why they would not and why they would do it. And then we'll take the IR group and see if they address the why nots and if they hit the whys and the value props. Does that make sense? I'll say, so I guess group 3, were you customer? Who's group 3?
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Customer, you want to start? Got your spokesperson?
some of these are familiar, as was gone over in the role play, that the payback period is pretty lengthy at 4 to 5 years, and we have a lot more urgent things to take care of. At the same time, we have a leaky roof, the broken HVAC, and a parking lot to take care of. And if we do some of these Ingersoll Rand projects, we may not be able to do these other projects, including from other buildings. And something we didn't put on there was the potential political impact of taking money from the other properties, spending it on this one property might cause some fighting by the real estate company. Another reason to not do it is that our tenants are paying the electricity expenses, and we can make the argument it's not our problem, it's not going to help our bottom line to make this investment. And the impact of the actual construction, if it takes a while, for instance, to put the HVAC up, it could be discomfort from the tenants, which may actually drive them away in the long run. On the other hand, I thought the ROI is fairly attractive at roughly 25%. Certainly from an investor standpoint, that's something that most companies would want to do, or other companies help finance it. One of our mandates is to reduce the maintenance costs, and if we do that, we may be able to pass those savings down to our tenants, possibly restructure the leases, and then everybody's on board. And we are paying, I think, 18% vacancy rate. We are paying those directly right now, those expenses to the utility. So any decrease in expense today, until we get those tenants in, that will be immediate cost savings for us. That's mainly.
I was going to say, any questions or comments? You raised your hand? No? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, nice job. Thank you. I guess group 4, is that the next customer group? We'll get some tape and hold that up here in a minute.
The vertical approach. So we basically thought this boiled down to whether we had the luxury of looking at a longer time horizon to invest in energy efficiency thing, given the pertinent things like the roof and the driveway. So I'll try not to read this verbatim, but basically we have limited capital, and we have to pool the money from other buildings if we want to do everything. What we do here will affect other buildings. In particular, we're a property manager that has 40 properties under management, and our opinion about things, if it doesn't go well, could affect our relationship with GC Corp, which is the owner of the other 39 buildings. The lobby would occupy 100% of funds, so if we decide that that is something we have to go forward with, it'll be at the cost of everything, including the efficiency improvements from Ingersoll Rand. The roof now is cheaper than in the long run. We're weighting that with also the possibility that there are kind of synergies between energy efficiency and protecting the roof. If you have an envelope that's leaking water in, you're also losing heat through the ceiling. The short-term median costs we talked about, and our occupancy rate isn't that low yet, so we wouldn't want to do anything that would drive more people away by not doing the more immediate repairs. The pros of doing the energy efficiency things is that HVAC needs to be fixed. So again, there might be things that are productive for energy efficiency and for the immediate repairs that we need, which would be kind of like incorporating a hybrid version. So maybe we wouldn't go with all the Ingersoll Rand recommendations immediately, but do them kind of piecemeal and do them as we can afford to do them, favoring the ones that do both energy efficiency and the improvements to the building that our tenants are complaining about. This could also be a model for other buildings. So the flip side of the liability with the GC Corp and alienating our relationship with the other 40 properties that we manage is that this could be a model to roll out there, and it would be something that reflects well on our property management company. This is a great marketing tool to not only keep the 82% in our building and 84% overall, but to attract more customers to come back. We also think that long-term utility rates are going to rise. So investing now, the ROI is based on what our prices are today. So this will be not only a way to lower prices in the future, it'll be a partial hedge on the prices going up too much. And this is something where we can pass savings on to tenants, whereas them moving is an additional cost they have to incur. We can say we can help you cut money or cut your costs right now by reducing your energy bill. And then I don't know if we were overachievers or what, but probably not. So we went into what kind of information we need to clarify this decision and make it more numbers based. And that was basically a breakdown of costs for the capital improvements to the building as well as for the Ingersoll Rand improvements. And then, as you mentioned in your mock conversation, the incentives based on policy and state and federal whatnot, and looking at kind of what impacts specific tenants that are thinking of leaving, such as the law firm would have on our occupancy rate. So, any questions?
Some unique thoughts there. Any questions, comments?
There's a lot of speculation about who may or may not leave based on, you mentioned the breakout group. Are you ever allowed to pull tenants, or do you ever get involved in trying to support your cause, or say, hey, listen, we polled 95% of your tenants feel that energy efficiency is a key driver, where they choose to stay or not stay? And how involved do you get in that part of the discussion?
It varies opportunity by opportunity, but it's a great idea. We do that a lot, especially like in schools, where we'll have meetings with teachers and principals to understand how the facility is impacting their ability to educate kids. They have a high absenteeism rate because of bad indoor air quality, or the noise is out of control, some of those kind of things. So yeah, it's a good idea. I like it. Other comments? Okay. Good job. There we go. Yeah, we'll take this. Group 5. Oh, 6. 5. Group 5, I'm sorry.
So first we started thinking about the reasons not to invest in energy efficiency. So obviously there's limited capital. It has to go to immediate needs and the things that have to be done, not the things that we necessarily just want to do or that would be good to do. And then there are misaligned incentives. The savings from lower energy bills in this building are going to accrue to the tenants because of the leasing structure, not to the property management company. Also, we're assuming that our company has a payback threshold, and if the project doesn't meet that threshold, it's not an option for us to actually take on the project. We thought, tenants might care more about aesthetics, so they care about the lobby, they care about how nice the parking lot looks. They don't care about how efficient the HVAC system is. Another is that we have to consider risk in the entire building portfolio. We have to consider whether or not we're borrowing against our other buildings. We have to consider keeping the tenants in all of our buildings happy. If capital from another building goes to a project in this building, is it going to make the tenants there unhappy and lead to more problems? Another issue is trust. How do we know that the savings estimates that Ingersoll Rand are giving us are accurate, and how do we know that they accurately reflect the building that we're looking at? Another is that there's a lot of uncertainty around utility rates. So the numbers that we're using to develop this ROI right now may not be the same over the long term. Then we thought about reasons to invest in energy efficiency. From the beginning, tenant satisfaction, more reliability in the heating and cooling of the space, lower operating costs for those tenants who are paying their own utility bills, and then overall satisfaction with the indoor air quality, the nice warm temperature at their desks and all that good stuff. Another is that the HVAC system's due for an upgrade anyway, so if you're going to upgrade it, why not make it the most efficient that you can? Another is that you can charge a higher rent for more efficient spaces, And also, when you go to sell the building down the road, you might have a higher resale value if you can market it as green. Another is better tenant attraction and retention, so we might be able to do something about that 18% vacancy rate, and we might also be able to keep those 82% of our residents from leaving. Another is green marketability. You can market it to potential customers, which a lot of these touch on some of the same things. Another is that we could use this building as a case study for the rest of the portfolio. There would also be lower energy costs in common spaces and unoccupied space, so even though tenants are paying their own utility bills, they aren't paying the bills for the lobby, the hallways, the bathrooms, etc. Another is that it's good timing right now. Low occupancy means that we're going to disrupt fewer people in their office spaces, which might be an argument for doing it now. Another is, this was also one of our reasons not to invest, but reduced risk from utility price fluctuations. So on the one hand, if utility prices go down, it becomes less attractive, but if utility prices go up, the payback's going to decrease. Another is potentially pre-compliance. If we upgrade our facilities now, we might be ahead of the curve for future building codes. There might be tax credits and rebates available that we could get from our local utility, from the state government. And then we could use this as an opportunity to upgrade multiple buildings in the portfolio. Presumably other buildings are in need of HVAC upgrades, and we might be able to kind of leverage our business with Ingersoll Rand and get a discount if we go bulk.
Good comprehensive look. Any questions? Comments? So what does your group decide? Are you going to invest or not?
Well, we haven't heard you gotta sell it to me.
You guys did hit on a topic that comes up quite a bit, and that's the trust involved with, are the savings really going to happen, and how do you monitor that? So that's good. Okay, so that was the customers. Any final comments on the customer side?
Well, it's interesting, just the greenwashing potential from the Ingersoll Rand side, that, you know, big numbers and sort of dazzle them with lots of claims.
Yep.
But then are they willing to really either trust you on that and go with it, or work through how you've reached those numbers and challenge them? Do you get people who want to say, okay, here are your number, let's see it?
Absolutely. Several things happen there. We do offer a guarantee, so that is one way that we will take care of that, that discussion, and we'll guarantee the energy savings will be there. And it's a standard protocol that's used there. But there's a cost for that, because in order to do that guarantee, we have to do measurement verification, so it adds some cost to the program, because we have to have somebody ongoing into the building, monitoring, making sure things are happening, but there's some value to the customer, making sure that those savings are sustainable, right? Second way is if they have an engineer or somebody or a third party that wants to come in and take a look at how we've modeled the building, how we arrived at the savings, that's obviously is also a good way to do that. Okay, yes?
Do you ever help with the financing? Because I did a project this summer that had zero upfront capital because the company that was installing it used delayed billing, basically paid for it.
Delayed billing is one thing, but cash is king today, and it's hard to get larger companies to actually hold things on their books for a period of time. And without getting into a lot of details, there are so many things that impact that decision in a company like Ingersoll Rand. There are ways that we can do that, but typically what we'll do is help by bringing third parties to the table. It may be a bank or an investment house, it may be a LLC that we've put together to help fund that. So there's different ways to bring money to the table. I could talk for 2 hours on funding without stopping, without taking a breath. So, yes.
You have a diverse portfolio of products, but do you ever find that you're lacking something in your portfolio that customers are asking? If you're installing an HVAC system in a building that has crappy windows?
Great question. Absolutely. Windows, roofs. Fact is, we'll install, if it's the right thing to do for the customer, we'll install somebody else's HVAC equipment if for some reason it fits that building, it aligns with what's going on and they're right, they've already got the system in place, and we're just replacing one piece of it. So absolutely, you try to do what's right for the building. And the majority of a project is outside what we manufacture, typically.
There's a question on the other side there.
Thank you for correcting me.
This is sort of related, but do you ever do sort of performance-based incentives for you, such that you'd have a lower upfront cost to have part of the, payback later, or anything like that?
Go deeper. What do you mean? Give me an example.
So, know, so if they're gonna save X amount of dollars, that you would get a certain percentage of that savings. So
Okay.
it's a performance-based incentive for your company.
Yeah, there is actually a avenue to do that. It's called shared savings, where there's no upfront cost from the customer's perspective, and the ESCO would get paid over time based on the savings. And there are certain situations, especially in today's environment, where you can't do operating leases anymore. It's very difficult to. That's one way to keep it off the customer's books, and that's an example where you bring a third party to the table to fund that. There's a lot of challenges with that too, though, because every month you're going back, and now there's an argument about how much you save, because if you saved more, that means the customer's paying you more. So it puts you in an adversarial position with the customer. We don't like to be there. We want to be part of their partner in helping them moving forward. So that's one challenge. And then it's always more costly when you do it that way. They can typically borrow money. Most customers will borrow money directly for a lot less than what we would do putting together a group to fund a project like that. So the cost of money is going to be a little bit higher. But it can happen in certain situations. It does. There's another question?
Do you, aside from the kind of technology aspect, do you ever use behavioral programs for energy efficiency?
Great question.
Or partner with organizations that do, especially for
Yes.
places like schools?
Yeah, and schools are one area where there's a good example. We actually have a curriculum that can be taught in elementary school that helps to educate the kids on what do they need to do to save energy, how does keeping lights on, or what time of the day does an energy increase go up, so that we can actually help them understand what's going on in their buildings, and then therefore they can think more about keeping lights off and doing those kind of things.
And then, sorry, follow-up question. If you are doing that, right, both the tech and the behavioral side, how do you differentiate and say, like, this percentage of savings? I mean, clearly for the tech side, you could say this percentage of savings. Like, how do you measure those metrics for the software stuff? For the behavioral stuff?
That is really tough, to be honest. And typically, that's a piece we do to help the customer with their whole energy approach. It usually doesn't fall into the piece that we guarantee. It's a low-cost deal. It's something they have to implement. There's not a lot of accountability around it, so it's hard. But we have controls, for example, we'll put dashboards in the schools that will show, track energy use and how much they save over time, and convert it into how many cars you've taken off the road or how many trees that you've planted as a result of that. And then that curriculum can tie into that, so that the kids can actually go home and over the internet tie into the building system and take a look at that, and it makes it more real for them. So it's more about being a partner and helping them accomplish their mission than it is to try to get guaranteed savings. There are organizations out there that will do just the behavioral piece. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors there. I've been in this business a long time, and there's an awful lot of unhappy customers around that. So I always think it's best to do both, to try to get both. But the biggest piece, I think, in terms of sustainability is to make sure that the people who maintain that building have the right skill sets. And so we do have in-depth training on that kind of thing for technicians and those kind of folks.
Yeah. One of, just to give you an idea, California is spending $1 billion. The three major investor-owned utilities are spending $1 billion on energy efficiency programs each year now. They're spending 100 million of that just for the evaluations. So it's a big deal as to how you calculate what's actually saved. And when you get to the soft stuff, for example, a program we run out in California, which is called Green Schools and Green Campuses, is virtually impossible to tell what the savings are, except for the actual projects that the students carry out within the school. But the soft side, the education of the students, what they bring home to the parents so that the parents know to turn down, that's virtually impossible. And finally, California said on that particular piece, they weren't going to require energy savings as a measure. They're requiring it for all the other programs, but not for the soft stuff. So it's really difficult.
We do some fun things too, with having competition between buildings, between elementary schools or between dorms at colleges, so that they're tracking. And dorms, I think, plays going to have a huge impact, because now you're talking about adults that really can think through what they're doing, and their behavior really does impact energy use. Yes?
Just follow up on that. So from a project manager perspective, what kind of national policy or state policy would be more effective to you? Or if you flip that point, what about for consumer? Just from consumer perspective, what do they see? What will give them more incentive to join your program?
My personal opinion are incentives around certain type of energy reduction programs, or that help to actually fund the upfront program, I think are the most impactful. The ARRA, for example, where those funds were used for real projects, they made a big difference in customers buying today, because they knew that was going away. It lowered the cost, upfront cost, improved the payback. So I think incentives are huge. I really think that's better than hitting them over the head and saying you have to do this, because then decisions get made for reasons that aren't always the right thing.
So there's no gap between your perspective and the consumer perspective, you think? Or just there's everything?
No, I think consumers would agree with that, because I think for the most part, a lot of the building owners, they know what they need to do. I mean, this is not real rocket science. They know they should be saving energy, and a lot of it, the pathway there is clear. They've had enough of those studies, we ever talked about the studies, on their shelf. So it's just, how do you implement it, and how do you make it cost effective, and those incentives do that. So that's what I'm saying, that this put the customer in a position to be able to do the right thing by having some incentives. Lower the payback period, it helps it make more sense for them.
And let me take another tact on that question too, and you guys can certainly disagree with me on this, but in states where you have either an RPS for renewables or an ERS for energy efficiency, then you've got an incentive for people to meet that requirement, utilities particularly, to meet that requirement. If you're paying the freight though for doing the project, then you should earn the credit. Okay, so if you can have the state give whoever pays for the project earn the credit, even if they're, a mush target, those credits could be used as cash to help someone else out who hasn't met that criteria between utilities. So I think that's another incentive that can drive some efficiency into the market. Cap and trade, of course, or carbon tax would drive it much quicker.
I saw some other hands.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of what you do would go to meet either a LEED certification or an Energy Star certification. Is that something that you guys get involved with and pursue?
We have, I think, the last number, 900 LEED certified professionals. I'm LEED certified, even though I'm not actively engaged in buildings anymore. But yeah, it's absolutely, and we were talking about that earlier. One of the things when I talk about LEED, even though a lot of customers think that LEED adds cost to what they do, and they're not real sure whether the value's there for them to do that, how do you know if somebody says, my building's sustainable? If a third party hasn't come in and said, you've met this criteria. So even though it's a little bit more expensive, having that third party, I think, is huge, to come in and say, you've done the right things. We also were talking about what happens when you build a new building, especially. You get this great plan in place, here's the vision you have for it, and we want this and this, and we want to LEED platinum and all this, and then the cost comes in 35% above what you had budgeted for. Now you value engineer and stuff starts getting cut out. Guess the first thing that gets cut out? It's not the marble in the lobby, it's the high efficiency HVAC system that would help you get there. So having LEED helps them say, okay, we can't do that, we want LEED certification, we have to cut cost elsewhere, let's figure out another way to get at it. So it drives more efficient buildings. I think it's very big.
This kind of goes with the certification. You said you do M&B on your buildings. Do you
Yes.
do commissioning internally or third party? And how much do you see commissioning happening in the industry to optimize these buildings?
Another thing we just were talking about. I think commissioning is huge. There was a point in time where we said no project got done without commissioning. We do so much typically in a facility now, we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, but I'm actually have my team right now looking at how do we formalize commissioning within the existing building market. Because, and I don't say commissioning is just getting the building working the way it was designed to, I say get it working the way it's being used today. And old buildings are used very different, walls are removed, lights change, ceilings, all kinds of things happen. So you need to make sure it's efficiently operating for how it's being used today, so I think it's a very big deal. Not near enough. Even in the new building process, I don't think there's more than 20% that actually get a real serious commissioning done. And it's really big. There were buildings, he talked about a building that was LEED Gold. In the first year, they were both heating and cooling, 25, 30% of the building? 50% of the building was heating and cooling simultaneously. That doesn't make sense. And when I used to get into buildings, I'd climb up and I'd see ductwork that was boxed off or that went to nowhere, a VAV box that had nothing going to it. There's all kinds of stuff that does go on. So I think commissioning is big. And as the awareness goes up about needing to make sure that we are more efficient in these buildings, that's going to become a bigger and bigger offer.
And for lead certification, you have to commission, and
Yep.
then you need to recommission.
Yep, absolutely.
And then
Keep
we
that
should bring
lead.
in a third party.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, I mean, I can tell you our story with, we commissioned our office as lead CI, commercial interior, when new office we moved into. We got it certified as a lead silver, which is what we were shooting for. It took us 18 months after we moved in to complete the entire documentation required. It's not an easy task, and we had a lead AP certified architect doing the work for us.
And having an architect do that kind of work's not cheap. That's what I'm saying, it does add some costs. So there's some balancing that's gonna happen in this. I'm gonna make a suggestion, if we could. Why don't we move on to the Ingersoll Rand side of things, go through those two presentations, and we get back and have some final discussions before we close out. So group one? Yeah.
A lot of the other groups brought up some really good points that we're also looking at. So some objections we came up with were obviously competing capital. A leaky roof is pretty significant. We would want to take care of that, especially with the tenant issue. They want to obviously not have rain coming in their hurdle rate, $750,000 is quite a bit of money. 4 or 5 years also, we can see how that would be hard for the building owner to swallow. Uncertainty as well. Hopefully we will be building a relationship with our clients, and we have a lot of data that can support their trusting us and our recommendations. Some values we see to this for the owner: increased occupancy rates. This can obviously be advertised as a new green building with a very efficient HVAC system, including lower utility rates. As Matt mentioned, it's likely that rates are only going to increase in the future, so we think this would be a great sound investment. In addition to increased occupancy rates, you would then accrue more capital from more renters. And even word of mouth, if the conditions are right, everyone's very comfortable in their new environment. We know one of the problems was some complaints about conditions in the office, so they can help. Anyways, word of mouth, being comfortable where you're working is obviously very important and will help bring in new clients. We think that there will be decreased maintenance costs, which will be beneficial to the property manager. And also, we haven't accounted yet for tax incentives. There should be some significant state and federal tax incentives for updating the HVAC system. Another opportunity we see is there is an interest in updating the lobby, and why not doing this at the same time as, putting in a new HVAC system when you are going to be causing some disruption. Do it all at the same time, start saving money today.
All right. Questions, comments? How did the value prop match up against some of the cons over here? Do you think they did a good job of addressing reasons that the owner said they would not do it? Can you give me an example, one that maybe they used? Come on now, keep awake, we're almost done, we're almost there.
Well, I know we talked about reducing the operations and maintenance costs for the building, so that in itself, you're gonna have a value there, plus the decent ROI. So those two things coupled provides a pretty good value proposition.
And which con does that address then? One of the reasons, that clearly I think was mentioned, reasons to invest in a couple places. Does that impact a reason they would not invest?
No, that was more for
Yeah.
us saying.
That's what I'm just trying to get you to think. Go ahead.
I mean, I think, saying that it's for growing capital, they're saying tax incentives, so you're getting the money up faster, quicker, I don't know how the tax incentives work.
and I know tax incentives were mentioned a couple times, and just to continue to make you help you understand how difficult this can be, if this property owner has, went from 93% occupancy rate down to 82% occupancy rate, their building value dropped 20%. How much do you think tax incentives are gonna mean that individual in the next year or two? Probably not a lot. Because they're not making much money. They don't have much money to offset with the tax incentives. So it's just things to think about. It's not real simple to go through this. Where'd you put yours?
Oh, I put it right
Oh, right there, okay.
before the top though.
I was gonna put these over here. One of the things a lot of you have connected with, and I think that's good, was the occupancy rates. Obviously, we gave the IR folks, the customer didn't get to see this, but there is some outside information that will show that Energy Star buildings actually have command a higher rent rate, and that LEED certified buildings have higher occupancy rates. So you can bring those into the picture and start having conversations. The reason that's important, if you really want to do something significant in a customer's building, you have to connect the outcome to their mission, to what they're trying to do. It can't just be about savings, believe it or not. So if you can talk about tenant comfort that a lot of you have talked about, how that can translate into higher occupancy rates, and the fact that you can reduce operating costs and therefore maybe lower their rent, that helps the property manager, helps the owner get more people in there. So you're trying to connect to what their vision is. Okay, group two.
If anyone here can point out something that hasn't already been said, please, no control, pretty much. So I mean, I'm not gonna list everything here. I think I'll just kind of talk more in general terms. I think the big thing that kind of has come up a lot is, for objections, is definitely over the uncertainty. All these other capital projects we're competing with are gonna be able to give us very comfortable NPVs, payback periods, hurdle rates, and so forth. And I think the key for us is kind of tying in this uncertainty over the numbers here into our recommendations, which definitely involves like the scaling proposition. It's definitely, you can't look at it just in terms of what the savings is going to create for that one building. You have to say, okay, well, we have an uncertainty about our numbers over here, and this is a great way of reducing that uncertainty by using this this HVAC as a pilot program for some of our other potential buildings. I know that from my experience, I actually worked evaluating an HVAC project over the summer, and there's really been a lot of kind of developments in the region in the past like few years, if only because a lot of the kind of technologies from Japan, Europe have kind of come over to the States. But right now, if you want to install an air conditioning system, there's ways to do it in a kind of a lot more like modular way, where you kind of put one part in, kind of see what it saves you, and then install more parts. And it's also a lot less, I think people often have a misconception of like lots of drilling and backing out of walls and stuff like that, where you can actually, a lot of these new systems, you're actually talking about the VAVs, and a lot of work we did, it involved just like kind of new wires and existing infrastructure. It wasn't even, lots of, a lot of like, drilling and construction. But all in all, pretty much, yeah, reduce the uncertainty, use it as a scale project, and kind of like everyone talked about, improve their comfort. Look at reduced tax incentives, and we actually kind of ran the numbers on the LEED. We actually took a building that was LEED certified and Energy Star certified, but we said if you had that building and you got $100 for it in rent from your customers, in 2006, you'd be getting $115 if your building had been Energy Star certified and LEED accredited, and you'd be getting $126 in 2009. I think the key to that is don't even look at the numbers, just look at the trend of where this thing is going, and that's just without any kind of hockey stick effect that electricity prices, like Matt was talking about, could give you.
Okay. Questions? Owners, did they address any of your concerns? I think the blue shakes. Huh? Okay. All right. Thanks. Nice job. Here are those two graphs for the building owners. This one, and I apologize, this is black and white. I meant to mention something to you. But what they've done in terms of studies is to show that in the current last few years, that occupancy rates for LEED buildings have actually gone up a little bit while non-LEED buildings have gone down. Now, again, there's the devil's in the details, right? What is the base of LEED buildings? They're newer buildings. So how much effect does the fact that it's a newer space, looks prettier, have on that? So that's something the customer's gonna ask. But to me, this was, I think, very impactful when you think about Energy Star buildings, new buildings have been retrofitted, that they actually are able to have higher rental rates back to the return to the owner on those buildings that were more energy efficient. In this marketplace, bottom line, it is a selling point now to have a sustainable building. People would much prefer to be in a building that is sustainable. The feeling is it's a healthier building for my occupants. My costs will be down and I'm doing the right thing, I'm supporting the right thing. So this is a trend that's happening. We're not seeing it result in much business yet, but I do think it's coming. Okay, any other questions?
Is that price premium for Energy Star buildings, is that for tenants who pay their own electricity bill or for people who have a set rate? I guess my question is it a cost?
It's lease rate, it's what they actually get for the lease. So that would be dollars per square foot for the space you lease, and then your utility and general building costs would be on top of that. So part of that effect has got to be I'll pay a little bit more here because I know my my building operating costs are going to be lower, so that my net cost will be closer.
So it's a cost-based decision, not necessarily like air quality?
I think it's both. From what the information I've seen and conversations we've had, I think it's both. But it's pretty new stuff. I mean, and we have to see this trend continue and to move into the existing building space as we're renovating facilities to ensure that is what's happening.
Have you pitched your products and services to this building?
I can't answer that. I think we have talked to, but I can't answer that.
We can do it in the morning, right?
Sure, hey. Give me a meeting with the president tomorrow. We'll have a conversation.
I'm sure we're at the highest level already.
Can I ask you all a question? When you came to Duke, did you guys even consider sustainability or the approach that the university has in that area in making your decision where to come to school? How many of you did?
I mean, I'm in the Nicholas School of Environment, so if the university didn't support it in some way, like the fact that the university is trying to be sustainable means they're gonna support the school more also. So like, in that sense, it's a little bit of both.
Right.
Because if they didn't support sustainability, why would they have a good program in it?
Right.
Pat, just a data point on that survey we did recently, 25% of incoming students at the business school identified environmental sustainability as a differentiator in them coming here.
Yep.
So, and that's in the general population, and this is a pretty select set from that. So I'm guessing you get close to 100% here, but even school-wide, it's a pretty big number.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. The reason I'm asking, we're developing some new offers for higher education, and we understand that's a driver for students coming to schools. And I just wanted to test it and see if that was bore out here.
Let me also ask a question, because when I was walking down the hallway, I noticed that there was a sign for the Duke Energy Club. So how many of you are in the Duke Energy Club?
Founding members.
There you go. All right, good stuff. Glad to see that.
Anything else I can answer? Or
We have a reception to take any questions coming out. Maybe if you want to close, I've got one
Okay.
comment as well.
Well, I think we should get to the reception, have you guys keep asking questions of Brian and Pat. I just want to thank each of them real quick with a little gift. Brian, if I can thank you personally for coming down and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you. And also for our three Ingersoll Rand folks, Gretchen and Sue and Pat, thank you. Thank you. I guess Dan has one comment, but we'll head to the reception and you keep asking questions there.
Okay, drinks are soon. But we did pass out an evaluation form. It was at each of your tables. It'd be really useful to get your input. As you know, this is the first of our Leading Edge seminar series. So we're going to continue to iterate. What we've tried to do with this seminar is provide some really rich and grounded content and an opportunity to interact with that content to begin to master some of these skills. So this is our first foray on that. We're going to be refining it as we go. But thank you all for being here. Thanks for participating in this. I hope that it has stimulated your interest in the others that are listed on the back of your agenda. It's great to meet all of you, and let's head out and have some drinks and get to know each other. Thanks.
Hey guys, real quick, just so you noticed, we 3 of us did it. 5 is poor on your.
Yeah. We might
Thank
have
you very much.
a bimodal distribution, depending on how you read it.
Yeah, let me also note, Pat has a reading from HBR that he's a fan of, that he wanted to circulate to you all. So I'll put it in the back for him to pick up.
Yeah.
Want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I was down on the dirt here, right, talking with customers. This is more about strategic strategy, or strategy from a corporate level, about sustainability and a plan to actually take a corporation that does not have a sustainability plan and get there. So that was good reading. I thought it might be of interest to you, so I'll be back here.
Is that something also that Ingersoll already does, is work with corporations to do sustainability projects?
To do the planning?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay.
It's on the board.
All right. Just curious.
And I should do it now.
Sure.
I just realized we have an internship program at the Alliance, and we actually pay. So the spring internship application is coming up now, I think. If you go on our website, asc.org, many of you are consultants. We have quite a group.
And ASC's executive director will be back in November
that's
4
right.
as part of a panel on Energy for Tomorrow that we're running. So stay tuned, you'll hear more advertising for that. But another event in about a month's time, focused on this issue, but in the broader array of sort of where we're headed in terms of the evolution of the energy system.
And she's really good. An old friend, way back. Yeah, that's why
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.